Identity theft is one of the fastest growing crimes in the world. Millions of people are affected each year, and it costs billions of dollars. But what exactly is identity theft? You'll hear a lot of different definitions for identity theft, but a good combination of those definitions is that identity theft is the theft of a victim's identity in order to obtain credit cards, access to bank accounts, to steal money from existing accounts, to apply for loans, establish accounts with utility companies, rent an apartment, file for bankruptcy, or to obtain a job using a victim's name. You'll hear a lot of other terms used for identity theft, including identity fraud, credit card fraud, and credit fraud. Technically, these terms don't represent identity theft. For example, identity fraud is when someone steals your identity with the intent of becoming you, so they'll get a job in your name or take out a mortgage in your name. Credit card fraud and credit fraud are when someone steals your credit card number and uses that to fraudulently make purchases. Still, all of these terms are used interchangeably. So although each term has nuances of difference, they all come back to the same thing. IdentityTheft.com put it this way: after a thief has successfully gained access to your information, they become capable of many illegal activities. If performed properly, the thief can assume your personal identity and all that comes with it. In other words, identity theft can affect you on a lot of different levels. In order to protect yourself, you have to understand identity theft. So stay with us, because in the next lesson, we'll learn who identity theft affects. Thanks for joining us. We already know that identity theft is a crime that's committed when someone puts together pieces of your information to become you. But who does identity theft affect? According to the Federal Trade Commission, 1 in 6 Americans will be a victim of identity theft this year alone. In the past 12 months, 9.93 million people have had some type of identity theft crime committed against them. Victims spend on average of $1,200 in out-of-pocket expenses and an average of 175 hours in efforts to resolve the many problems that are caused by identity thieves. So identity theft is a very pervasive crime. So what groups does identity theft affect? You have individuals. Individuals are people like you and I. When we are touched by identity theft, we often lose money. We also lose valuable time trying to repair the damages of identity theft. And sometimes the damages can go even deeper than that. You have businesses. Businesses are affected by identity theft, both monetarily and also in terms of consumer trust. You have banks and credit card companies, both of which are affected, again, monetarily and in terms of consumer trust. And employers, who, when targeted by identity theft, can lose money, but they can also lose productivity and the trust of their employees. So in short, everyone is affected by identity theft. There's no single group that's left out and no single group that's targeted specifically. So how does identity theft happen? We'll learn that in the next lesson. Thanks for joining us. You've already learned that identity theft is when someone steals bits and pieces of your information for the purpose of becoming you. And you've learned that identity theft happens to everyone. But how does identity theft happen? Really, there are 2 methods for identity theft. You have real-world methods. Now, real-world methods include social engineering, which is basically like a con game. It's when someone pretends to be someone they're not for the purpose of creating a trust relationship with you so they can gain access to your personal information. You have mail theft and mail fraud. This, believe it or not, is one of the biggest ways that identity theft happens. And that's when someone steals or redirects your mail so that they can gain access to your personal information. There's dumpster diving. Your trash is someone else's treasure, and that's not to be taken lightly. Someone can take the stuff that you throw away and use that to create your identity, which they can then use for their own purposes. And another real-world method is shoulder surfing. Now, shoulder surfing is when you're maybe at an ATM machine entering your PIN number, and someone standing nearby you captures your PIN number, either using a cell phone with video capabilities or just their own memory. Then they steal your ATM card, and they can use your ATM card along with your PIN number to clear out your checking account. Now, in addition to real-world methods of identity theft, there are also electronic methods, and these are the methods that identity thieves use to get at you when you're online. These methods include phishing, which is when you receive emails that appear to come from a bank or credit card company that they really aren't from. Usually these email messages include a link, and you're requested to click through the link to the website to enter personal or account information. There's malware. Malware includes things like viruses, trojans, or worms that can be planted on your computer to collect information about you. And then when you connect to the internet the next time, the malware phones home, for lack of a better term, and sends the collected information to some thief somewhere else in the world. There are also electronic devices. Your cell phone, your GPS system, maybe even that brand new iPod Touch that you got for Christmas are all sources of personal information. You keep phone numbers, you keep your name and address on these devices. Some devices may even have credit card numbers entered on them. So if a thief can get a hold of your device, they have a whole lot of information about you to start with. There's another method of electronic identity theft called vishing. Now, vishing is just like phishing, except it takes place over a telephone line. So instead of receiving an email, you receive a telephone call from someone that claims to be with a credit card company or a bank, and they request information that they should have on file, such as account numbers, PIN numbers, the security number on the back of the card. And they'll tell you that they need this information to confirm your account, but in truth, they're collecting it to use for identity theft. And finally, you have hacking. Hacking is just when someone gains access to your computer. Once they gain access to your computer, they have access to all of the information that's stored on the computer. So identity theft can happen in a lot of different ways. So it's essential that you learn how to protect yourself. In the next lesson, we're going to look a little more closely at how identity theft affects businesses, and then we'll come back to protection methods a little farther on in the course. Thanks for joining us. How are businesses affected by identity theft? There's three ways, really. The first is cost. According to the FTC, identity theft costs businesses more than $50 billion per year. There's lost productivity. When a person's identity is stolen, it can take up to 600 hours for them to clean up the mess that's created. That means taking time off work, which means their employer loses productivity. There's also lost trust. According to the Identity Theft Research Center, 656 U.S. businesses experienced data breaches in 2008. That's nearly double those in 2007, and it affected millions of those businesses' customers who no longer trust their businesses now. So what are the threats to businesses for identity theft? Well, there are disgruntled employees or ex-employees who can steal information for purposes of reselling it. There are hackers that can break into their network to steal information. There's impersonation, which is when someone pretends to be their business that really isn't for the purposes of stealing information. There's social engineering, when someone tries to gain access to business information by pretending to be someone they're not. There's dumpster diving, when someone steals information out of trash cans. There are electronic devices, and many businesses don't realize that things like copiers and computers can contain personal information that can be used for identity theft. And then there's just plain theft, when someone steals the information. So what kind of information can identity thieves steal? There are two types of information, really. There's employee information that includes applications, resumes, health insurance, or personal information. And there's also customer information. That includes names and addresses, credit card numbers, social security numbers, and the answers to security questions. This is all information that can be stolen by identity thieves and used to commit identity theft against employees or customers. And then there's your business identity. And an identity thief can steal your business identity to use in their scheme to steal individual identities. And this creates those cost issues and lost productivity issues and lost trust issues that we talked about earlier. So identity theft is a real threat both to individuals and businesses. You have to learn how to prevent identity theft, and that's coming up in the next lesson. Thanks for joining us. One of the common misconceptions about identity theft is that it happens mostly online. The truth of the matter is, most identity theft happens offline. In fact, according to Javelin Strategy and Research, only about 9% of identity theft is caused by viruses, hijackers, and other computer malware. The remaining instances of identity theft happen in the real world when you go about your daily business. And the most common methods of identity theft are a lost or stolen wallet, checkbook, or credit card, corrupt or disgruntled employees stealing personal information from their employer, or theft of your personal information by your family, friends, and acquaintances. Coming in close behind that is mail fraud, mail theft, and then business identity theft, misuse of customer data, stolen customer data by a third-party company, or data breaches and other types of data theft. So how do you stay safe at home? Safety at home begins with some common prevention practices. First, you want to shred anything that contains personal information. That includes junk mail. You want to monitor your mailbox or use a locking mailbox or a post office box whenever possible. Another good practice is to not put your trash outside until just before pickup. A lot of people put their trash out the night before, which leaves it open to anyone that wants to come by and steal it during the nighttime hours. Always be aware of your surroundings. Know who's nearby you and what they're doing. Monitor your credit report 2 to 4 times a year. According to new legislation, you have access to one free credit report a year, but it's worth your while to either request additional credit reports throughout the year or even to hire a credit monitoring service just so you know what's always going on your credit report. Never give personal information to someone you don't know, and be cautious even around your friends and family. Identity theft tends to be a crime of opportunity, so the best way to protect yourself is to not give anyone the opportunity to steal your identity. That includes protecting yourself online, and we're going to cover that in the next lesson. Thanks for joining us. Although identity theft in the real world is more common than online identity theft is growing at a very rapid rate. Among the most common methods for online identity theft are phishing and spam, Trojans, and spyware. Adware, worms, and other electronic methods of identity theft make up the remaining percentages. So how do you keep yourself safe online? There are 2 ways, really. First, you need to use good computer security. That includes installing computer security such as a full antivirus solution. Make sure that solution updates regularly and is always active in scanning incoming files. You need to be sure that you have anti-spam capabilities in place. Most mail programs these days have anti-spam, and adding a spam message to a blocked list is as simple as a couple of clicks of your mouse. You need to install at least 2 anti-spyware applications. Anti-spyware applications all tend to look for different signatures. Signatures are like trails that spyware leaves behind. So each different anti-spyware application looks for some different signature. What one anti-spyware application catches, another one might not. You also need to include a software firewall in your security lineup. And if you happen to be a business, you might want to consider using a hardware firewall. Now, the other way to protect yourself online is to learn how to recognize phishing emails. Because phishing makes up almost half of identity theft online, learning to recognize phishing emails is automatically going to help you prevent identity theft. Some of the things that you may encounter in a phishing email include poor spelling. Phishing emails also usually request account information that a company should already have on file with you. And most often, phishing emails request information even though a company's privacy policies state that they will never request that information from you. Phishing emails also often come from unrelated email addresses, and they include links that don't lead to the actual company website. They lead to a spin-off website. So, for example, if you were to get a phishing email from US Bank, instead of being www.usbank.com, the link might actually lead to a website that is www.security.usbank.com. So you need to be able to recognize these different things in phishing emails. Understand also that phishing emails are growing more and more sophisticated. They're getting much harder to spot. So always trust your instinct. If you receive an email that you aren't positive that you should click through the link that's included, just don't do it. There's more to cover about identity theft. In the next lesson, we're going to look at identity theft laws and how they affect you. Thanks for joining us. Understanding identity theft legislation is essential if you become a victim of identity theft. It will help you to understand what rights you have as a consumer in recovering your identity. Until recently, very little legislation applied to identity theft specifically. Most of it was geared toward the financial industry, but nothing really addressed the issue of identity theft. These days, nearly all states have identity theft legislation in place, and federal identity theft laws are also gaining momentum. Some of the identity theft laws that you might need to know about include the Fair Credit Reporting Act. The Fair Credit Reporting Act is legislation that's designed to protect consumers from fraudulent or inaccurate credit information reporting. Now, although this doesn't specifically apply to identity theft, it does entitle you to receive a copy of your credit report. This is a copy that you'll have to pay for. It also entitles you to have past credit items removed from your report in a reasonable amount of time. The Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act, which you've probably also heard called FACTA, is a consumer bill of rights that was passed in 2004 that provides guidelines and penalties for how companies collect and handle consumer information. This is the legislation that entitles you to one free credit report per year, and you can access that credit report at annualcreditreport.com. Now, the FACTA red flag rules is an addendum to the FACTA Act that charges companies to monitor the information they collect, especially electronic information, for warning signs of identity theft. These warning signs include unusual charges on your credit account or sudden changes that seem to have no basis in reality. Finally, there's also pending legislation called the Identity Theft Enforcement and Restitution Act. This legislation would increase the scope of what's considered identity theft. It would also increase the penalties for identity theft. So identity theft would become more of a crime. It's a trend that we're seeing happening, and it's a good trend because identity theft has become such a major element in today's world. One other thing that this bill would do is allow identity theft victims to recover costs associated with repairing the damages caused by identity theft. For example, if you become the victim of identity theft and you lose
150 work hours trying to repair the damage, the Identity Theft Enforcement and Restitution Act would give you the right to recover the salary that you would earn during that time. So as you can see, the legislation surrounding identity theft plays a big role in not only how you recover your identity if you become victimized by identity theft, but also in the way that merchants and businesses manage your personal information. In the next lesson, we're going to cover recovering from identity theft. Thanks for joining us.
Learning that your identity has been stolen can be a gut-wrenching experience. It can result in many emotions that you don't expect, including shock that your identity has been put at risk, anger that someone else has gained access to your personal information. In some cases, shame when crimes were committed in your name, and you'll experience frustration almost every step of the way. Identity theft can also have personal, financial, and legal repercussions, so your best option is to recover as quickly as you can once you learn that your identity has been stolen. So the steps to recovering your identity then begin with acting quickly. This is one of the reasons that I suggest that you monitor your credit report on a quarterly basis. The sooner you learn that something's wrong, the sooner you can stop additional damage from being done. You need to close all of the affected accounts. This includes credit accounts, bank accounts, utility accounts, or any other account that's been opened in your name fraudulently. Next, you need to create a fraud alert on all three of your credit reports. This is usually easy to do by contacting the credit reporting agency and telling them you need to place a fraud alert on your account. Filing police reports is going to be one of the more frustrating steps along the journey to recovery. You need to file police reports. If your mail has been tampered with, you'll need to file a report with the Postal Inspector General. And you'll need to file a report with the FTC also, because the FTC tracks instances of identity theft. And this is how larger identity theft rings are broken up. Now, when you're filing a police report, you may find that your local law enforcement agency doesn't know how to handle a police report for identity theft. Although this is something that's happening less and less, many local law enforcement agencies have not been trained to handle identity theft complaints. You'll need to be firm when you request that they take your police report, and be sure that you get a copy of the report also. You also need to create a paper trail. Every step along the way, keep copies of everything that you do, from the bills that you get in that show fraudulent charges, to creating a log of every person at every company that you talk to. You need to create a paper trail that's going to show your efforts to repair your identity, because unfortunately, when it comes to identity theft, many times you're considered guilty until proven innocent. Identity theft is a dangerous crime. It's a crime that affects more aspects of your life than just your finances. So protecting your identity is the best way to go. If it's not possible for you to protect your identity and you find out that you have been victimized by identity theft, just act quickly. The faster you move, the less damage is done.